Hi everyone, Tim Brown. Welcome to my Apple Podcast. Okay, I'm switching back to the iPad. I want to feature an application for the iPad that allows you to superimpose images, and it's called Superimpose by Goswami. At least that's the developer's last name. I can't pronounce his first name, but it's Goswami, the last name. And do not confuse Superimpose with other applications that use superimpose in the title. This application is just simply Superimpose, and it's by Goswami, and it's in iTunes, available for 99 cents. And like I mentioned, it allows you to juxtapose images, but it gives you enough controls where you can do a lot with those images. So let me go ahead and pull this application up on my computer screen here. And just give me a second, I need to launch this full screen. And let me just walk you through the basic steps, how this application works. I love it for its simplicity, and yet I love it because it gives you so many editing options. So I'm going to press on this icon in the top left corner. It's going to access my camera roll. And I'm going to choose a background image. And this is a nice photograph that I took while I was in Arizona a couple years ago. But I'm going to superimpose two layers. So I'm going to go in, select this icon in the top left corner again, and you see I have the option to now add a background or foreground image. I want this to be the background, so I'm going to choose the option foreground, and I'm going to add a person on top. Okay, now I have a person, has a clear background, so that's going to be helpful. Now I'm going to use my finger to expand, and you see that I really can't move that photo that I added on top separately. They're like one image. Why? Because you have to move through all the menu options. So along the bottom, there's also an option called Transform. By selecting Transform, I now have the option to resize the image that I just added, which I'm going to do. And you notice too that you have the option to rotate as well if you want to do that. But I'm not going to do that. I just want to resize it enough so it looks like she's in the picture. And I'm going to bring it flush to the bottom. And then you look on the right hand side and you can see that you can also control the transparency. So if I wanted to make her a little bit more transparent so that you can see a little bit of both images at the same time, I have the option to do that. There's also an option up top. I can actually flip horizontally or flip vertically. So that's a nice option to have. And you can use to justify it. There's a tool in the top right corner. If you press it, it will justify the image. But of course, that distorts her face. I don't really want to do that. So right next to that is what looks like a kind of a return key. Just restores it to the original image or resets it, basically. Okay, I'm going to resize this once again and kind of give the impression that this figure is in the foreground. And now I'm going to go to the masking option. You see the menus up top change, and the menu along the right also changes. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when you're using the masking mode, the tools are used differently. Typically, when you use a photo editing application, you have an eraser tool. That's the first tool at the top right. You just go in and you just start erasing. Well, if you're using a masking tool, the eraser works the opposite way. It's to restore the mask, not to apply the mask. If you want to apply the mask, use the brush tool. So with the brush tool selected, I can now go in and start erasing that background. In any mode, whether you're in transform, masks, or filters, which I'm going to show you in a little bit, there's a settings icon in the top right corner. Will give you options to make various adjustments. In this case, I can control the size of the brush or the smoothness of the mark. Okay, are you with me so far? Cool. All right, now what I want to try is using the color range option. This basically allows you to tap on any area of the photo to pull out a particular color or colors that are in the same range. So if I tap on, say, the darkness of her shirt, then it pulls out all the other colors that fall within that same range. So it's an interesting option to have. Again, speaking to the flexibility of this application in terms of all the things that you can experiment with and have fun with. I'm going to undo that and go with the wand tool. Since the background is white, if I just tap on the background, I can just take that right out. So that's a pretty cool option to have. And there are other things you can do too. You have the Lasso Tool. This basically allows you to go in and just customize what areas you want the mask to go. So I could just draw, any old kind of shape, and then that's where the mask would be applied. Of course, I don't want to do that. Here's another option where I can just draw a rectangle, and that rectangle would become the masked area. Or I could choose a circle for the same reason. You can also use a linear gradient as well. So if you want to use a linear gradient to determine where you wanted it to be transparent and opaque, and just make adjustments that way. That's always a nice option. And then you have also another type of linear gradient where the gradient occurs in the middle rather than from side to side. And then you have also another gradient where it's circular and it occurs in the center. So you can play around with those options to see, what works for you. But I just like the fact that you have so much flexibility. It's just really, really awesome that you can do all of this. Okay, I'm going to go back to my wand tool, select the background and erase it. And now I realize that, she's a little too small. Maybe I want her to be larger. So I'm going to go back to transform, which will enable me then to resize it again. Then I'm going to go back to mask if I need to continue to mask. But I don't need to do that anymore. So now I'm going to go over to the next option, which is the filter option. And again, you see that the tools change. So I can now go to the hue, saturation, and then control the saturation of the image as well as the hue. I can also choose to make color balance adjustments, exposure, contrast, if I want to do that. Now here's what's really nice, is you also notice in the top left corner, you have a F and a B. They stand for foreground and background. Foreground is now highlighted. So with foreground selected, I can use all of these adjustment tools and apply them to the foreground layer. But I also have the option to go back to the background layer and do the same thing. So if I wanted the background, for example, to have a blur radius, I can apply that to the background image, which helps to bring out that foreground image. So I can fool around with where and how I want those adjustments to be applied. So you get my point. This application provides you with so many different options for editing. It looks so simple. It doesn't seem like you can do so much. But once you start playing around with all the options, you start to realize, hey, there's a lot that can be done here. And when you're finished, you just go back home. And then you have the option to export to your photo library, Facebook, Twitter, or save as a PNG. So if you happen to want to preserve the transparency, having that PNG option is pretty good. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of my Apple Podcast. The app again is Superimpose by Goswami. It's 99 cents in the App Store. Thanks for tuning in. Check me out next time.